The moment I touched the little boy's hand in that parking lot, I saw everything. Two men, a burning room. My name screamed into silence. And the worst part? I already knew their faces. I'd been running from them for 4 years. I have a rule about touching strangers, not because I'm antisocial, though honestly, my therapist would probably argue that point, but because touching people does things to me that I can't always control. Tori, a handshake at the wrong moment and suddenly I'm drowning in someone's worst memory. A brush of fingers in a grocery line, and I'm feeling someone's grief like it's my own. It's not a gift. It's not a curse exactly. It's more like being forced to read a book you never asked for, in a language that goes straight to your chest instead of your brain. My name is Eli Navarro. I'm 26 years old. I'm an Omega. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Denver, so off Colfax Avenue, in a building that smells like old radiator heat and someone's perpetual garlic chicken. I work as a freelance medical illustrator. Yes, that's a real job. Yes, it pays. And yes, I chose it specifically because it keeps me behind a screen and away from unnecessary human contact. I have one close friend, a beta named Marcus, who texts me memes at 2 in the morning and pretends that counts as emotional support. Mas, I have a standing order at the coffee shop 3 blocks down where the barista, a sweet older Omega named June, already knows I want an oat milk latte with 2 sugars and absolutely 0 conversation before 10 a.m. I have a 4-year-old son named Noah, and for 4 years I have kept those 2 facts, my son and his father's, in completely separate universes, the way you keep bleach and ammonia in different cabinets. Not because I'm cruel, not because I didn't love them once, only in the reckless, free-fall way that only happens when you're 22 and stupid and convinced that feeling something that big means it has to be real. I kept them separate because the last time I was in the same room as Calder Holt and Remington Voss, I was bleeding, terrified, and utterly alone, and neither of them had come. So, 2 separate universes. That was the plan. Plans, as it turns out, have terrible aim. It was a Wednesday. I remember that specifically because Wednesdays are my grocery days. Structured, efficient, completely unremarkable. Noah had been at his preschool since 8 that morning, the little Montessori place on Monaco Parkway that I'd spent 3 months on a wait list to get him into, and I had exactly 90 minutes before pickup to get groceries, get home, and get dinner started. I had a list. I had reusable bags. Then I had noise-canceling earbuds in because the fluorescent lights at the King Supers on Leetsdale make a sound that most people can't hear, but that I, with my annoyingly heightened Omega senses, find genuinely unbearable. I was in the parking lot, loading bags into the back of my used Subaru. Very Denver of me, I know. I contain multitudes. When I heard it. A child crying. Not the performative grocery store cry of a toddler denied a snack. This was different. This was small and frightened and lost. The kind of sound that bypasses your ears entirely and goes straight to something animal and instinctual in your chest. I pulled one earbud out. The boy was standing 3 rows over, between 2 parked cars, maybe 4 years old, wearing a red jacket that was slightly too big for him. He was crying with his whole body, shoulders shaking, face crumpled, hands fisted at his sides. And he was completely, utterly alone. I looked around. No frantic parent sprinting toward him. No one paying attention at all, actually, because people in parking lots are deeply focused on their own business, and the ambient tragedy of a child crying apparently does not register as an emergency to most adults. "Don't touch him," said the careful, self-preserving part of my brain. "You don't know where he's been. You don't know what you'll see. He's 4 and he's terrified," said every other part of me. The second voice won. It usually does, and that's probably my biggest flaw. I crossed the parking lot, crouched down in front of him, and kept my voice low and easy. Hey buddy, you okay?" He looked up at me, and I stopped breathing. He had dark hair, slightly wavy, pushed back from a face that was all wide bone structure and serious eyes. Gray-green, the color of a sky that can't decide between storm and sun. His mouth was set in that particular expression children make when they're trying very hard not to cry anymore because some instinct tells them they should be brave. My hands went cold. I knew that face. I knew it the way you know a song that lived in your chest for years before you ever heard the words. Not because I'd met this child, but because I had seen that jaw, those eyes, or that exact stubborn set of the mouth on two different men who had occupied the largest and most catastrophic chapter of my entire life. Okay, I thought. Okay, this is fine. This is a coincidence. Children look like things. Children look like all kinds of things. Are you lost? I asked him. My voice came out steadier than I felt, which I considered a personal triumph. He nodded. One single miserable nod. Do you know your name? Jasper, he said. His voice was hoarse from crying. Non Jasper Holt-Voss. The name hit me like a physical thing, like a hand pressed flat against my sternum. Holt-Voss. Holt. As in Calder Holt, Alpha King of the Western Pack territory, whose scent I had spent 4 years trying to forget, and whose hands I had spent approximately the same amount of time trying not to think about. Voss. As in Remington Voss, Alpha King of the Northern Pack Coalition, the most infuriatingly composed man I had ever met, who had looked at me once with those dark eyes like I was something he had been waiting for, and then nothing. Nothing. Gone. Holt-Voss. Which meant this child, this beautiful, lost, gray, green-eyed child standing in a King Soopers parking lot in Denver, Colorado, belonged to both of them, together, which meant they were, don't, I told myself. Do not spiral in a parking lot. You are a grown adult. You are fine. Okay, Jasper, I said, owed it with what I felt was extraordinary calm given the circumstances. My name's Eli. Where did you last see your dads? Inside, he said, pointing vaguely at the store. I was looking at the fish tank by the door, and then they were gone, and then I came outside, but I couldn't find the car. There was a fish tank by the entrance. Of course there was. Of course this child had been distracted by a fish tank. This was personally devastating information, delivered in the most mundane possible way. All right, I said. Let's go back inside and find them, okay? We'll tell the customer service desk and they'll... Can you hold my hand? He asked. And there it was. The one thing I'd been carefully not offering, because the moment I touched him, really touched him, skin to skin, I would feel whatever psychometric echo was running through him, and I did not know if I was prepared for what that might be. But he was 4. He was scared. And he was looking at me with those devastating gray-green eyes like I was the only safe thing in his immediate vicinity. I took off my glove. I wear thin ones even in mild weather, another one of my quirks, and I took his hand. It hit me all at once. Not pain, not fear. Something warmer and stranger than that. An impression of 2 large presences, steady and familiar. The emotional equivalent of standing between 2 oak trees. Safety. The particular safety of being known. And underneath that, something darker. A low, anxious hum, like a note held too long, like something that had been worried for a very long time about something it didn't have words for yet. And then cutting through it like a struck match. A scent. Not Jasper's scent. Something older. Something carried in him the way children carry their parents' emotional histories in their bones. Cedar and cold water. Pine smoke after rain. I knew that scent. I had tried for 4 years to forget it, and apparently my body had decided to archive it in the section labeled, "Do not open, ever, under any circumstances." I stood up too fast. My knee popped. Jasper looked at me with mild concern. "Are you okay?" he asked with the solemn gravity of a child who has been told to check on people. "Completely," I said. "Totally fine, just old. My dad, Rem, says 26 isn't old." I stared at him. "Your dad knows how old I am?" Jasper blinked. "No, he just says that to Dad Cal when Dad Cal says his back hurts. Dad Cal, Dad Rem." I was going to need a moment. I was not going to get one. "Let's go find them," I said, and I kept his hand in mine and walked toward the entrance, which is when the automatic doors slid open and 2 men walked out, moving with the kind of urgent, barely controlled energy that belongs exclusively to parents who have lost a child in a public space and are 3 seconds from burning the building down. I recognized them immediately. Of course I did. 4 years is not actually that long. Not when the people in question are Calder Holt and Remington Voss. Calder was exactly as I remembered. Tall, broad, that particular brand of physically overwhelming that makes rooms rearrange themselves around him without anyone consciously deciding to. His dark hair was shorter now, cut close on the sides, and he was wearing a gray Henley pushed to the elbows in that careless way he'd always had, like temperature was something that applied to other people. His jaw was tight. His eyes were scanning the parking lot with the systematic precision of someone running threat assessments in real time. Remington was 2 steps behind him, and somehow still the more unnerving of the two, leaner, quieter, with the particular stillness of a person who is only ever calm on the surface. And he had dark eyes that I had always found deeply inconvenient because they had a way of settling on you like they intended to stay. He was wearing a black jacket, collar turned up, hands in his pockets, and his expression was the careful blank of someone who was genuinely, deeply afraid and had decided that showing it would not be useful. They both saw Jasper at the same moment. The relief that crossed their faces was so immediate and so raw that I felt it without touching either of them. Just a wave of it in the air, the biological scent shift of 2 alphas coming down from a threat response. Then they saw me. Calder went completely still. Remington's hands came out of his pockets. The 3 of us stood there in the King Soopers parking lot in Denver, Colorado, on a perfectly ordinary Wednesday afternoon. Well, now, while 4 years of silence pressed down on the space between us like a weather system. Jasper, unbothered, swung our joined hands once and announced, "I found Eli." Found me, I thought. Interesting framing, kid. "He has my same eyes," Jasper added thoughtfully, looking up at me and then back at his father's. "And your same hair, Dad Cal. Did you know him?" Calder's jaw worked once. His eyes hadn't left my face. There was something moving in them that I absolutely refused to identify. "Yeah," he said, very quietly. "We knew him." Remington said nothing. He was looking at me the way he'd always looked at me, like he was reading something, like I was a language he'd almost translated, like he was one word away from understanding something that mattered enormously. I let go of Jasper's hand, put my glove back on, squared my shoulders. "He wandered out while you were inside," I said, keeping my voice completely professional. The voice I used on client calls and pediatric appointments. "He's fine. He wasn't alone long." "Eli," Calder started. "I have to go," I said. "I have a pickup." "A pickup," Remington repeated. His voice was exactly the same, low, measured, with that particular quality of making you feel like he'd heard 3 other things underneath the words you'd actually said. "Yes," I said, "a pickup, a thing that people do when they have somewhere to be." I picked up my grocery bags, which I had apparently set down at some point without noticing, and I walked back to my Subaru, and I got in, and I started the engine. My hands were shaking, not from fear, or at least not only from fear, because the thing I hadn't told them, the thing sitting in my chest like a stone, was that my pickup was at the Montessori school on Monaco Parkway, and the child I was picking up had dark hair, slightly wavy, a face all wide bone structure and serious eyes, gray-green, the color of a sky that can't decide between storm and sun. His name was Eli Navarro, and he was 4 years old, and he had never met his fathers. But looking at Jasper Holt-Voss today had just confirmed every fear I'd spent 4 years carefully not examining. Because Noah didn't just resemble Calder and Remington, he was identical to Jasper, feature for feature, expression for expression. 2 Alpha Kings met a child who looked exactly like them. I pulled out of the parking lot. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I told myself that was fine. I told myself I hadn't seen Calder's hands shake when he looked at me. I told myself the scent of cedar and cold water wasn't still sitting in my chest like an old bruise suddenly pressed. I merged onto Leetsdale Drive and aimed for the school and thought, very clearly, I am in so much trouble. That thought followed me all the way down Leetsdale Drive, like a stray dog I kept trying to wave off. I turned up the radio. Is some pop song I didn't know. I turned it back down because the lyrics were something about fate, and I was not emotionally equipped for that particular theme right now. The light at Colorado Boulevard turned red, and I sat there, both hands on the wheel, and did what any reasonable person would do in my situation. I had a completely silent internal crisis. Okay, let's be logical about this. I had run into Calder and Remington in a grocery store parking lot, in a city of 700,000 people, on a Wednesday. This was statistically improbable, but not supernatural. Denver had become PAC territory headquarters 3 years ago. I knew that. It was public knowledge. It had been in every major news outlet when the Western and Northern PACs had formalized their joint governance. I had told myself it didn't matter because Denver was enormous, and I lived quietly and kept my head down, and there was no reason our paths would ever cross. I had been wrong about that. The light turned green. I drove. The part of my brain that liked to torture me for sport immediately supplied the memory of Calder's face in that parking lot. The way the relief at seeing Jasper had shifted into something else entirely when his eyes found mine. Something unfinished. Something that had no business being on a man's face after 4 years of absolute silence. And Remington, sure, standing there with his hands out of his pockets like he'd physically needed to do something with them. Looking at me like I was a problem he'd been trying to solve for a very long time and had just found a new variable for. I white-knuckled the steering wheel. They had a son, together. Jasper Holt-Voss, 4 years old, who had my same eyes and Calder's hair, and Remington's particular brand of quiet gravity. Eon already present in a child that aged like a personality trait someone is simply born with, which meant at some point in the last 4.5 years, while I was gone, they had. I stopped that thought before it finished forming because I was driving and I needed to not feel things quite that large while operating a vehicle. The Montessori school came into view. I pulled into the pickup line and put the car in park and sat there for exactly 30 seconds, pressing my fingers against my sternum like I could physically push the feeling back down. Then I got out of the car because I had a child to collect, and he was genuinely the only thing in my life that reliably made sense. Noah was waiting by the cubbies near the front entrance, which meant he had been ready early, which meant he'd had a good day, which I could tell before I even reached him, because the particular quality of his stillness was different when he was happy versus when he was processing something. Happy Noah sat quietly, but with this subtle brightness to him, like a lamp someone had just turned up a few degrees. He saw me, and his whole face rearranged itself into something that punched me directly in the heart every single time. "Dad," he said, hit with the deep satisfaction of a person who has accomplished a great deal and is ready to report in. "Hey, bud." I crouched down, and he walked into the hug with his usual lack of ceremony, like it was simply the correct next step in a logical sequence. I held on for a second longer than usual, and he let me, which meant he'd also had a mildly perceptive day, because Noah always seemed to know when I needed the extra 3 seconds. "I painted a mountain," he told me, pulling back and handing me a piece of paper that was indeed a mountain, rendered in an aggressive amount of blue tempera. "This is genuinely the best mountain I've ever seen. It's Long's Peak," he said seriously. "Ms. Patricia showed us pictures." I stood up and took his backpack and handed him the painting to carry, and we walked to the car, and I spent the entire 30-second walk doing what I had done every single day for 4 years. Looking at him, measuring the distance between who he was and who I was afraid he might eventually need to become for other people. He had dark hair, slightly wavy, pushed back from a face all wide bone structure and serious eyes, gray-green, the color of a sky that can't decide between storm and sun, a jaw that was still soft with childhood, but already had a shape I recognized. I buckled him in, closed the door, stood beside the car for exactly 5 seconds, with my hand flat against the window glass. And then I got in the driver's seat and started the engine. "Can we have pasta?" Noah asked. "We can have pasta. The kind with the butter and not the red stuff?" "Sure." "Dad?" "Yeah." "You smell weird." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He was looking out the window with the same mild observational energy he brought to everything, completely unbothered, just noting a data point. "Weird how?" I asked, and I kept my voice easy. Like outside, he said. Act like when it's about to rain. My psychometry didn't work on myself. I couldn't read my own emotional echoes the way I could read objects or people. But Noah had inherited something from me. Not the full ability, not yet, maybe not ever. Just a sensitivity, a small, quiet knowing that lived in his nose more than his hands. He smelled cedar and cold water on me. He just didn't know what it meant yet. It did rain a little, I said. This morning. Noah accepted this with a nod and went back to watching Denver slide past the window, and I drove us home. And I did not let myself think about the fact that somewhere in this city, in whatever home two Alpha Kings shared, a boy named Jasper Holt-Voss was probably sitting at a dinner table with my exact son's face, and that tomorrow, or the day after, or someday very soon, the math was going to become impossible to ignore. Alan, I parked in our spot behind the building and sat there for exactly 4 seconds longer than necessary. Noah was already unbuckling himself with the focused determination of a child who has decided waiting for adults is inefficient. I watched him in the mirror and thought, not for the first time, that he had gotten Remington's self-sufficiency in the womb like a personality download. That was not a comfortable thought. I filed it next to all the other uncomfortable thoughts I kept in the cabinet labeled later. Eli, deal with it later. Dad, the door. I know, bud. Give me 2 seconds. That's what you always say, and then it's more than 2 seconds. That's called rounding down. It's a math concept. Noah gave me a look in the mirror that was so specifically unimpressed, it nearly made me laugh out loud. And he had learned that expression from me, and I was now experiencing what it felt like to be on the receiving end of it. Parenting is genuinely humbling. I got out. I got him out. I grabbed the groceries and his backpack and his mountain painting, and we went inside. Our apartment was the kind of place that looked chaotic to visitors and made complete sense to us. Noah's art covered the refrigerator in 3 overlapping layers. My drafting tablet and stylus lived on the kitchen table next to a coffee mug I kept forgetting to wash. There was a bookshelf in the living room that had exactly 4 children's books on it and approximately 60 adult ones, because Noah had decided at age 3 that he preferred being read whatever I was reading, which had led to some very creative abridged summaries of medical textbooks. I put the groceries away. I started water for pasta. Noah sat at the kitchen table with a fresh piece of paper and began drawing another mountain because apparently that was his current artistic era, and I respected the commitment. My phone buzzed. I looked at it expecting Marcus and his routine 2-sentence emotional devastation disguised as a meme. Instead, there was a number I didn't recognize. Denver area code. The message was 4 words. We need to talk. I stared at it for long enough that the water started boiling over. Dad, monte on the pot. I turned the burner down. I set my phone face down on the counter. I dropped the pasta in and stirred it with the focused energy of a man choosing violence against his own anxiety. My number wasn't public. I'd changed it twice in 4 years. The second time specifically because I'd gotten a block call at 2 in the morning that I'd never been able to verify, but that had kept me awake until sunrise doing threat math. There were maybe 6 people who had my current number. Marcus, Ian, my landlord, Noah's school, my one regular client, my doctor, and apparently now someone with a Denver area code who had 4 words and no introduction. I picked the phone back up. I typed, "Who is this?" No question mark, because I wasn't asking. I was stating a demand with punctuation stripped down to match my energy. The response came in 11 seconds, which meant they'd been watching the screen. Remington, don't hang up. I put the phone down again. Dad, the pasta. I know about the pasta, Noah. It's making a noise. Pasta does that. A bad noise. I turned around and the pot was absolutely making a bad noise. And I rescued it and drained it and got the butter from the fridge. And the whole time my phone was sitting face down on the counter, radiating the specific energy of a problem that had decided it was done being patient. I made Noah's pasta. I put it in his bowl. I added exactly the right amount of butter, which I knew by sight because we had done this approximately 400 times. I put it in front of him, and I ruffled his hair, and he ducked away from my hand with a dignified 4-year-old's protest and started eating with the serene focus of someone who has no idea that his entire carefully constructed world is currently vibrating at a concerning frequency. Then I picked up my phone. I typed, "How did you get this number?" Remington. Marcus. I was going to have words with Marcus. Several words, arranged in a very specific order. Me. Marcus doesn't know you. Remington. He does now. Calder is persuasive. That was so specifically accurate that I actually felt a reluctant muscle in my face attempt to smile, which I shut down immediately on principle. Me. What do you want? Remington. To talk. In person. Not a demand. A request. Me. I'm busy. Remington. You're making pasta. I looked up from my phone very slowly and checked the window above the sink. Nothing outside but the alley and the dumpster and the neighbor's aggressive wind chimes. Me. Are you watching my apartment? Remington. No. You always made pasta when you were stressed. Some things don't change. I sat down in the chair across from Noah and pressed my thumb and forefinger against the bridge of my nose and breathed through the particular sensation of being known by someone you had spent 4 years trying to unknow. This was the thing about Remington that had always undone me. Not the status, not the authority, not even the way a room rearranged itself when he walked in. It was this, the quiet attention, the way he filed things away without you realizing he was doing it, and then produced them later, gently, like evidence. He remembered that I stress-cooked pasta. He had remembered that for 4 years. Me. That's not a fair thing to say. Remington. I know, I'm sorry. Can we meet? Tomorrow. Public place. You choose. I looked at Noah. He had finished half his pasta and was now using a noodle to draw a line across the bowl in deep concentration. He had Remington's hands, the same long fingers, the same deliberate way of moving them, like every gesture was considered before it was executed. I had known somewhere under all my carefully maintained denial that this day was coming. You can only keep 2 universes separate if neither universe is aware of the other. The moment Jasper had said his name in that parking lot, the wall between them developed a crack. Cracks, in my experience, do not stay small. Me. I'll think about it. Remington. That's more than I expected. Thank you, Eli. I turned my phone over again, looked at the ceiling. Noah's mountain painting was taped up next to the window, slightly crooked, catching the last of the evening light. Dad, Noah said with his mouth mostly full. Don't talk with food in your mouth. He swallowed, tried again. Does Long's Peak have snow on it right now? Probably some, yeah. Can we go see it? Maybe this weekend. He considered this. Can I bring my drawing to compare? Absolutely. He went back to his pasta, satisfied, and I sat across from him in our small warm kitchen with the wind chimes going next door and the radiator ticking and my phone quiet for once on the table. I thought about Remington remembering the pasta. I thought about Calder's hands shaking in that parking lot. Oh, I thought about Jasper's small warm fingers in mine and the wave of safety I had felt moving through him. The emotional imprint of being loved steadily by 2 people for his entire life. My son had never felt that particular kind of safety. The 2-person, steady as oak trees kind. He had felt mine, which I hoped was enough, which I sometimes at 2 in the morning was terrified was not enough. The crack in the wall got a little wider. I did not text Remington back that night. But I also did not delete the message. And for me, in that moment, those 2 things were not the same. I got Noah bathed and into bed by 8:15, which was either a parenting win or a sign that he had burned through every unit of social energy he possessed at school and had nothing left. Probably both. He let me read him 2 chapters of the illustrated astronomy book we were working through, asked 3 genuinely excellent questions about whether stars could feel lonely, and accepted my answer that they probably had too much going on to be lonely, and was asleep before I finished the 2nd page of chapter 3. I stood in his doorway for a moment, the way I always did, just looking, just checking that the specific small fact of him was still real. Then I went to the living room, sat on the couch, and called Marcus. He picked up on the 2nd ring, which meant he was either already awake or had been waiting for this call. And given what I now knew about his recent activities, I was betting on the 2nd one. Before you say anything, Marcus started, you gave my number to Calder Holt. Technically, he already had your old number, and I just confirmed the new one was real. Marcus. He was very convincing, Eli. The man walked into my workplace and stood there looking like a natural disaster in a Henley and asked one question, and my brain just sort of handed over the information like it was nothing. You have one job as my friend. One. Keep my location classified. I panicked. He smells like a forest fire. You know I have a thing about alpha pheromones. My therapist and I are working on it. I pressed my palm flat against my forehead. You are completely useless. I'm aware. Are you okay? The question landed softer than everything before it. Marcus had known me for 3 years. He knew about Noah. He did not know about Calder and Remington specifically. Not the full story, just the outline I had given him. 2 alphas, a bond that didn't survive, a choice I had made alone. He had never pushed for more than I offered, and that was a significant part of why we were still friends. I ran into them today, I said, at the grocery store. Silence. And then, both of them, and their son. Another silence, longer this time. I could hear Marcus doing the math in real time, the same way I had done it in the parking lot, and I waited while he arrived at the same answer. Eli. His voice had changed entirely. Does the kid look like... Yes. Feature for feature? Feature for feature. Oh boy. Yeah. What are you going to do? I looked at the ceiling. The radiator ticked. Was somewhere outside a car alarm went off and then stopped, embarrassed of itself. I don't know yet, I said, which was honest, which was the most terrifying sentence I had said out loud in recent memory, because I always had a plan. Planning was how I had survived the last 4 years. Plans kept the 2 universes separate and the crack in the wall manageable, and my son safe inside the only version of his life I knew how to give him. Okay, Marcus said. I'm sorry I gave them your number. And I mean it. I know you do. Do you want me to come over? No, I'm fine. You're stress spiraling on the couch. I'm calmly processing on the couch. There's a difference. Sure there is. Call me if you need me. I hung up, put my phone on the coffee table, looked at it for approximately 45 seconds, then picked it up again because apparently I had made a decision somewhere between the couch cushions without fully consulting my own brain. I opened Remington's message thread. Was me. There's a coffee place on 8th and Sherman. Opens at 7. If you want to talk, that's where I'll be tomorrow morning at 7:15. If you bring Calder without asking me first, I will leave. I sent it before I could think about it longer. Thinking about it longer was how things didn't happen. And I had been thinking about this particular problem for 4 years, and all I had to show for it was excellent avoidance skills and a recurring dream about cedar and cold water that I was absolutely not going to examine right now. Remington's response came in 8 seconds. 7:15. Just me. Thank you. I turned the lamp off, went to bed, lay there in the dark for a while listening to Denver being Denver outside my window, the distant sound of traffic on Colfax, someone's music 3 floors up, the particular urban nighttime texture of a city that never completely quiets. I did not sleep well. This was not surprising. 7:14 the next morning, I walked into Corinne's Coffee on 8th and Sherman, wearing my best version of unbothered, which consisted of dark jeans, a gray jacket, gloves already on, and an expression I had spent approximately 20 minutes in the bathroom mirror, calibrating to read as calm, and not as a man who had rehearsed 6 different versions of this conversation while pretending to sleep. The place was small and warm and smelled like dark roast and cardamom. Wood paneling, mismatched chairs, a chalkboard menu, the kind of local place that had survived 3 rounds of neighborhood gentrification through sheer personality. I came here sometimes when my apartment felt too small for whatever I was feeling. June from my regular spot was not here, which was good because I did not need a witness. I ordered my oat milk latte. I sat at the small table by the window where I could see the door and also the street, which was habit, not paranoia. There is a difference. My therapist agreed, mostly. Remington walked in at exactly 7:15. He was wearing a dark coat, collar up, and he moved through the door with that same contained quality he'd always had, like he took up precisely the space he intended to and not 1 inch more. He spotted me immediately. His eyes did the thing, the settling thing. like finding me was the completion of a calculation he had been running. He ordered something at the counter without looking at the menu, came to the table, sat down across from me. We looked at each other. 4 years of silence took up most of the available air in the room. "You look good," he said. "Don't," I said. He nodded once, accepted that, set his coffee down, laced his fingers together on the table in that deliberate way of his, like he was physically organizing his thoughts into something speakable. "I'm not here to make this harder than it already is," he said. "Then maybe lead with whatever you actually came to say. Because I have a pickup at 3 and approximately 0 patients for a slow build right now." Something shifted in his expression. Not offense, something quieter, almost like relief, which made no sense, except that Remington had always responded to my directness the way most people respond to open windows in stuffy rooms. "Jasper hasn't stopped talking about you," he said, "since yesterday. He described you in detail to Calder for 40 minutes. He said you had kind hands." My chest did something inconvenient. "He's a sweet kid," I said carefully. "He is." Remington looked at his coffee, then back at me. "He asked if you were going to be his friend." I said nothing, because there was nothing to say to that, not without opening a door I was not ready to open in a coffee shop at 7:15 in the morning. "Eli," his voice dropped, just slightly, just enough. "When you left—" "I didn't leave," I said, quiet, level. "Sure, I was not given a reason to stay." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Remington's jaw tightened. His fingers pressed flat against the table for a moment and then released. I watched him absorb that, watched him sit with the specific weight of it, and I did not soften it because it was true, and he knew it was true, and we were both too old and too tired for comfortable rewrites. "You're right," he said finally. "You're right, and I have spent 4 years knowing you're right and not knowing how to—" He stopped, pressed his thumb against his knuckles. "I'm not asking you to forgive anything. I'm asking if we can talk. Properly. All 3 of us." "All 3 of us," I repeated. "Calder needs to see you. Not wants. Needs. There's a difference, and he won't admit it, but I'm admitting it on his behalf because someone in our dynamic has to be the one who says the true thing out loud." That was so painfully, was exactly Remington that I had to look out the window for a moment at the Denver morning sliding past, the gray sky, the mountains visible at the end of the street like a promise the city made and mostly kept. "I have conditions," I said, still looking at the window. "Name them." I turned back, met his eyes. "Neutral location, my terms, my timeline. And if at any point it stops feeling safe, I walk and there are no follow-up texts." "Agreed." "All of them. And not just the first 3. All of them, agreed." I picked up my coffee, took a sip, looked at him over the rim of the cup and thought about Jasper's fingers in mine and the wave of 2 oak tree safety and Noah asking about stars being lonely. "I'll text you a time," I said. Remington exhaled. It was barely audible, but I heard it, and my psychometry did not need skin contact to read what that breath meant. It moved through the air between us like something that had been held for a very long time, finally being set down. "Thank you," he said, for the second time in 12 hours. I nodded, finished my coffee, stood up. "Remington." He looked up. "Whatever you came here hoping I'd say," I told him, pulling on my jacket, "I haven't said it yet. And now don't get ahead of yourself." I walked out into the Denver morning, and the cold air hit my face, and I did not look back through the window, even though every single nerve in my body wanted to. Some things you hold on to, not because you've forgiven them, but because letting go completely means admitting it mattered. And it had. God help me, it still did. The walk back to my car took 4 minutes. So I know because I counted my steps the way I do when my chest is doing something I haven't given it permission to do. It's a grounding technique my therapist taught me in year 1 of Noah's life when I was running on 3 hours of sleep in pure stubbornness and the specific terror of loving something so completely that its existence rewrites every calculation you've ever made about your own survival. 44 steps, cold air, watch the mountains at the end of every Denver street like they're supervising. I got in the car, sat there, pulled off my right glove, and pressed my bare hand flat against the steering wheel. This was something I did sometimes when I needed honesty and couldn't get it from my own head. Objects hold residue, emotional fingerprints. My steering wheel had 4 years of mine pressed into it, and right now it gave back exactly what I expected. Exhaustion, love, with low-grade fear worn so smooth it had become structural, and underneath all of it, something that had never fully calcified. Something that still had a pulse. I put my glove back on, started the engine, drove. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at it at the next red light. Marcus. How did it go? Marcus. Actually, don't answer that. I can tell from the silence it went. Complicated. Marcus. Do you need breakfast foods delivered to your apartment? I typed back one-handed. I'm fine. So standing down on the Marcus betrayal tribunal. For now. Marcus. That's very generous of you, Marcus. Also, Calder Holt called me again this morning. I nearly ran the light. Me. Why? Marcus. He wanted to know if you got there okay. I told him I wasn't your secretary. He said he knew. He called anyway. I put my phone down and drove the rest of the way home with the particular energy of a man who is refusing to feel things in a very active and effortful way. Calder had wanted to know if I got there okay. Calder, who had stood in that parking lot yesterday, was shaking hands and said we knew him in a voice that had no business being that quiet, had called my only mutual contact this morning to check that I had safely walked into a coffee shop. I parked behind my building, sat in the car, looked at the dumpster and the neighbor's wind chimes, and thought about the night I had left Denver 4 years ago. I had not taken much. A bag, my tablet, were the small emergency fund I had been quietly building for 6 months because some part of me had known, the way I sometimes knew things before they happened, that I was going to need it. I had not told either of them I was leaving. I had not left a note, which I still had complicated feelings about, or a forwarding address, or any explanation at all. I had just gone, because 3 days before I left, I had picked up Calder's phone by accident in the dark of their bedroom and felt it. That was the thing about psychometry that made it genuinely terrible to live with. You don't choose what you read. You don't get to decide the moment is too intimate or the information too large. You touch something and it opens like a wound, and you see whatever it holds whether you want to or not. Calder's phone had been warm from his hand, and the moment my bare fingers closed around it, I had felt the whole shape of a conversation he'd had 3 days prior. The emotional residue of it soaked into the glass like heat into stone. A voice I didn't know. Female. Beta. From the scent impression that came with the memory. Speaking in the clipped, certain tone of someone delivering a professional assessment. The Pack Council's position is final. An unmated Omega with no territorial lineage cannot hold bonded status with dual Alpha Kings. The optics alone create a governance liability. If you proceed with a formal bond, you risk the coalition. And then Calder's voice, low and strained in a way I had never heard from him in person. There has to be another way. And then, there isn't. Not without a fight that fractures everything you've built. You know what the right choice is. I had put the phone down, stood in the dark. Let the information move through me the way psychometric impressions do, like cold water finding the lowest point. Then I had gone to the bathroom and sat on the floor and done the math. Unmated Omega. No territorial lineage. Governance liability. Me. They were talking about me. And Calder had not said no. He had said there has to be another way, which sounds like resistance until you understand that people who are going to choose you don't ask for alternatives. They just choose you. They say no, absolutely not. This conversation is over. He had not said that. I had been gone within 72 hours. I had found out I was pregnant in a clinic in Colorado Springs 3 weeks later, sitting in a paper gown under fluorescent lights with my bare hands pressed flat in my lap because I could not afford to touch anything in that room and feel what other people's fear had left behind in the walls. I had looked at the test result for a long time, and then I had made the only decision that felt survivable. I would keep my son. I would raise him. I would build something solid enough that he never had to feel the specific weight of being the reason someone else's world got complicated. I had done that. For 4 years, I had done exactly that. And now Remington was sitting in a coffee shop on 8th and Sherman saying, "You're right." Like it was simple. Like 4 years of silence could be addressed over a single cup of dark roast. And Calder was calling Marcus at 7 in the morning to make sure I had arrived safely somewhere. And I was sitting in my car behind my building with my hands in my lap and the specific sensation of a wall developing structural problems. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number this time. Denver area code, but different from Remington's. I knew before I opened it. "This is Calder. Rem gave me your number. I know you said not to contact you without asking. I know this is me doing exactly that. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. That's all. You don't have to respond." I read it 3 times. Calder Holt did not apologize. Not in any version of him I had known. He argued, he deflected, he got loud and then got quiet and then got louder. He showed remorse through action rather than language because words had always been Remington's territory, and Calder had always expressed himself through presence, through showing up, through being physically between you and whatever threatened you. And on an apology and a text message at 7:30 in the morning meant he had been sitting with it long enough that the usual channels weren't working. I typed back, "I know you are. Not it's okay. Not I forgive you. Just the acknowledgement. Just the confirmation that I had received it and that it had landed somewhere real." His response took 2 full minutes. "Can I see you?" I looked at those 3 words for a long time. Looked at them the way I looked at psychometric impressions, was trying to read the emotional texture underneath. The lowercase, no question mark, the way it was phrased as something closer to need than request. Marcus had said the man walked in and stood there looking like a natural disaster in a Henley. I thought about Jasper swinging our joined hands in the parking lot. Unbothered, whole, love steadily from both sides. I thought about Noah asking if stars could be lonely. I typed, "There's a meeting being arranged. You'll be included. Shamash, that's all I can offer right now." Calder, "That's enough." Then after a pause, "You looked good yesterday. I don't mean that weird. You looked like yourself. More than before." I stared at that, at the clumsy, characteristically Calder way of saying something true without quite having the vocabulary for the full version of it. More than before. Before, when I had been 22 and deeply in love and quietly terrified of how much I needed 2 people who had not yet proven they could hold that weight. I had grown up in the 4 years since. Apparently it showed. Me. Raising a kid alone will do that. I sent it without thinking. Felt my stomach drop the moment it left my hands. 3 seconds of silence. Calder. "What?" I closed my eyes, opened them, looked at the dumpster, thought several things very rapidly, most of them unprintable. Well, so that was how the crack became a door. I sat there staring at my phone like it had personally betrayed me, which, to be fair, it had. 4 years of careful architecture, 4 years of separate universes and managed distances and strategic silence. Undone by one sentence I had typed without engaging my brain first because, apparently exhaustion and Remington's dark eyes and Calder's lowercase apology had collectively disabled my better judgment. My phone rang. Not a text. A call. Calder's number, which I had not yet saved because saving it would have been an admission of something, filling my screen with that same Denver area code and vibrating in my hand with the urgency of a man who had just received information too large for a text box. I let it ring twice, picked up on the third. Silence for exactly 1 second. Then his voice, and the thing about Calder's voice was that it had never learned to be small. Even quiet, it filled space. Even controlled. Which it barely was right now. It carried the specific frequency of someone whose entire chest was involved in the production of sound. "Say that again," he said. "Good morning to you too, Calder." "Eli." Just my name. Just those 2 syllables in that voice with that particular weight behind them. And I felt it move through me the way his scent had moved through Jasper's fingers in the parking lot. Cedar and cold water. Still there. Still exactly that. "I heard you," he said. "Or I need you to say it again so I know I heard you right." I looked at the dumpster. I looked at the wind chimes. I made a decision that felt less like courage and more like the moment you stop treading water because your arms have simply given out. I have a son, I said. He's 4 years old. His name is Noah. The silence on the other end was not empty. It was full, overfull, the way a glass looks right before the surface tension gives. I could hear Calder breathing. It could hear the specific quality of a large man trying to hold himself very still, and underneath that, barely audible, the sound of something that in anyone else I would have called a sharp inhale of pain. 4 years, he said. Yes. You were already. He stopped, started again. When you left? Yes. Another silence, longer this time. Does he? Calder's voice did something I had never heard it do before. It broke, right in the middle of the sentence, cleanly, like a branch that had been holding weight for too long. Does he know about us? No, I said, quietly. No apology in it, because I had made that choice with everything I had, and I was not going to perform regret I didn't feel. He knows he has 2 fathers somewhere. He has never asked to find them. He's 4. He asks about stars and mountains and whether pasta shapes affect the flavor. A sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. It didn't quite make it. Does he look like? Yes, I said. Here he looks exactly like Jasper. The silence after that one was different from all the others. It had a texture, something raw and enormous and completely undefended, moving through the phone line between Denver and my parking lot. I need to see you, Calder said. Today. I know you said the meeting on your terms, but Eli, I am asking you. Today, please. The please hit different from Calder than it did from other people. Calder did not please. Well, Calder operated in a register somewhere between a statement and command, not from cruelty, but from the simple biological reality of being an Alpha King who had been obeyed so consistently that the word please had largely atrophied from disuse. Hearing it now in that voice, rough at the edges in a way he couldn't smooth out, did something to my chest that I resented enormously. I'll text you an address, I said. 2 hours, come alone. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I hung up, and I sat for another 30 seconds. Then I got out of the car, went upstairs, made coffee I didn't drink, and texted him the address for Cheeseman Park, the wide-open green space 3 blocks from my apartment, where Noah and I came on weekends to look at the mountains and argue gently about whether clouds had personalities. Neutral ground, open air, no walls to feel too small. Calder was already there when I arrived. Of course he was. Calder was constitutionally incapable of being anything other than early. It was one of those small specific things I had filed away in the 4 years since, and had not been able to unfile no matter how much I'd wanted to. He was standing near one of the park benches on the east path, hands in the pockets of a dark jacket, looking out toward the mountain line with the focused stillness of a man who had been standing there long enough to go through several internal arguments and come out the other side of all of them. He heard me before he saw me, because alphas always do, and he turned. We were maybe 15 feet apart. Neither of us moved for a moment. Up close in daylight, without the shock of the parking lot mediating everything, I could see what 4 years had done to him. He was still broad, was still physically overwhelming in that way that made ambient space rearrange itself. But there was something in his face that had shifted, something around his eyes that had not been there at 25. Not age exactly, more like weight, the particular heaviness of someone who had been carrying something for a long time and had gotten very good at not showing it. He looked at me the way he had always looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Like I was something he couldn't fully account for, like I confounded his math. Hi, I said, because someone had to start. Hi, he said. His voice was different without the phone between us, fuller, more careful. We walked to the bench without discussing it, sat down with a foot of space between us, which felt both completely insufficient and absolutely necessary. The park was quiet at this hour, a few joggers on the far path, a dog walker near the fountain, the mountains doing their usual stoic supervisory thing at the edge of the sky. Tell me about him, Calder said. Not tell me what happened. Not why didn't you tell me. Not the accusation I had been braced for, the version of this conversation I had rehearsed and re-rehearsed in the dark for years. Just tell me about him. Something in my chest loosened by approximately 1 degree. He's funny, I said. Seriously funny, not performing funny. He makes observations about the world that are so specific they stop you mid-sentence. He's currently in a mountain art era. He has opinions about pasta shapes. He asked me last week whether the moon gets tired of being looked at. Calder made a sound low in his throat. Not a word. Just a sound. The kind that means keep going when language is temporarily unavailable. He's careful with things, I continued, and I was talking about Noah, but I was also, I realized, talking about Remington. He touches stuff like he knows it matters. He gets overwhelmed in loud spaces. He's brave in the specific way that kids are brave when they've been safe enough to trust the world a little. You did that, Calder said. That last part. That was you. I looked at my gloved hands in my lap. I tried. Eli. He shifted on the bench. Not toward me, not quite, but the foot of space between us changed quality, became something more deliberate. I didn't know. About the council conversation. Ari, that you'd heard it. I went still. Rem figured it out about a year after you left, he said. He found your glove, the one you'd lost in the bedroom. He picked it up and just. Calder's jaw worked. He went white. I'd never seen him go white before. He told me what you must have felt in it, and He stopped, pressed his fingers flat against his knee. I should have told you myself. I should have told you that I had been given a choice, and that I had already decided what I was going to choose before that conversation was finished. I should have said it out loud to you before you ever had to find it the way you did. The morning air was cold and clean and smelled like grass and distant pine. What were you going to choose, I said, very quietly. He turned his head and looked at me, fully, the way he had maybe 4 times in all the time I had known him. Walk without the protective layer of command or confidence or the carefully maintained impression of a man who always knew what he was doing. You, he said. I was going to choose you. I had already decided. I just hadn't said it yet, and then you were gone, and I had no way to tell you something you'd already stopped believing. The wind moved through the park. Somewhere a dog barked once and went quiet. I breathed in, breathed out. Well, that's the most expensive unsaid thing I've ever heard of, I said. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Not quite not one either. Yeah, he said softly. It really is. We sat there for a while after that, not touching, not resolving anything. Just 2 people sitting in Cheeseman Park in the Denver morning with 4 years and one enormous truth between them and the mountains watching from the end of the sky. It was fragile, what was happening. Honore, I could feel it the way I felt everything, in the specific texture of the air, in the quality of his stillness beside me. Beautiful in the particular way of things that have been through weather and are still somehow intact. I knew it wouldn't stay this quiet. There was still too much unspoken, still too much that lived on the other side of this moment, waiting. But for right now, in this small window of morning light and cold air and tentative honesty, I let it be what it was. A beginning that had been a very long time coming. That thought sat with me the whole walk back to my apartment, quiet and careful, the way you carry something fragile in both hands. I did not examine it too closely. Examining fragile things too closely is how they break before you've decided what to do with them. My phone stayed quiet for the first block. Then 2. I was almost at my building door when it buzzed. Remington. He told you about the council conversation, not a question, a statement. Remington always knew. Me, yes. Remington. I wanted to be there when he did. Me. Why? Remington. Because there's a part of that story Calder doesn't know he left out. I stopped walking, right there on the sidewalk in front of my building, with the wind chimes going overhead and a pigeon eyeing my grocery situation with professional interest. Me. What part? Remington. Not over text. When you're ready to meet with both of us, there's something you need to hear. And I stared at that message for a long time, long enough that the pigeon lost interest and moved on to better prospects. The thing about Remington was that he did not create suspense for effect. He was not dramatic. He was precise. When he said there was something I needed to hear, he meant it with the same energy a surgeon means it when they say there's something on the scan. Me. Tomorrow. Same coffee shop. Both of you. 9 a.m. Remington, we'll be there. I went upstairs. I worked. I picked up Noah. I made dinner. I read astronomy. I went to bed. I did not sleep at all. They were both there when I arrived at 8:58. Calder was standing near the window and Remington was already seated, and the sight of them in the same small room doing the thing they always did, existing in that particular gravitational relationship where Calder occupied the physical space and Remington occupied the atmospheric pressure, one hit me with a nostalgia I had not given myself permission to feel in 4 years. I ordered my coffee. I sat down across from them. I put both hands flat on the table, gloved, and looked at Remington. "Talk," I said. Remington wrapped both hands around his cup, the deliberate organizing gesture. I braced. "The council conversation Calder told you about," he said. "The beta advisor, the governance liability assessment." "I remember." "She wasn't acting on council authority," Remington said. "She was acting on instructions from someone inside our pack structure who wanted you removed. Someone who had been working toward that specific outcome for approximately 3 months before that conversation happened." The coffee shop was warm. The cardamom smell was the same as always. Everything felt slightly tilted. "Who?" I said. Remington's jaw tightened once. "My brother. Declan." Calder, beside him, went very still in the way that meant he was controlling something large. Declan hired her," Remington continued, steady and quiet and precise. "He drafted the governance language specifically to make your position sound legally untenable. He chose the moment carefully. He knew about your ability. He did not know you would touch Calder's phone. He thought the conversation would reach you through other channels, more slowly, with more room for misinterpretation. I heard all of this. I processed all of this. I sat with it moving through me the way large things move, and not quickly, not cleanly, displacing everything it touched. "Your brother," I said. "Yes." "Declan, who I met 4 times, who brought us dinner once when Calder was sick, who shook my hand at the coalition dinner and smiled like he meant it." I had shaken Declan's hand. I remembered it clearly now, the brief contact even through the single-layer gloves I'd worn that night, the faint impression I'd gotten and immediately dismissed as ambient social anxiety. I had read it as nervousness. It had not been nervousness. "He wanted the Northern Alpha seat after me," Remington said. "A bonded Omega with no territorial lineage complicated the succession optics. More than complicated. In his assessment, it blocked it entirely. So he had me removed," and I said, "like a scheduling conflict." "Yes." The word landed in the room and stayed there. I looked at my coffee. I looked at my hands. I thought about 3 weeks after I left, sitting in a clinic in Colorado Springs in a paper gown, making the calculation of what I could survive alone. I thought about 4 years of 2 a.m. anxiety and carefully maintained distance, and Noah asking whether stars got lonely. All of it. Every single day of it. Because Declan Voss had wanted a seat at a table. "Does he know about Noah?" I said. My voice came out level. I was genuinely surprised by that. Remington's expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough to tell me something I was not going to like. "Iga Remington. We don't know the full scope of what he knows," he said carefully. "We found out about his involvement 8 months ago. We've been managing the situation since then." "Managing," I repeated. "Eli, you knew 8 months ago," I said, "that your brother engineered my removal, that I left because of something deliberately constructed to make me leave." "Yes. And you didn't find me." The silence was immediate and total. Even the coffee shop noise seemed to drop. Calder's hand moved on the table. Not toward me. Just a shift, like he'd started a gesture and stopped it. "We were building a case," Remington said. "Declan has influence across 3 pack territories. Moving against him without complete documentation meant risking everything we'd done." "I don't care about your documentation," I said. Not loud, not sharp. Quiet, which was worse. And I knew it was worse because both of them registered it the same way. A slight contraction, like the words had hit something with mass. "You knew where I was for 8 months," I said. "You knew what had been done, and you chose your case over finding me." "It wasn't that simple," Calder said. His voice was rough. No, I agreed. It really wasn't. Because somewhere in those 8 months, I was putting Noah to bed alone and telling him that sometimes families look different and trying to explain the concept of fathers to a 3-year-old who had never met his. Calder made a sound, low and brief and completely unguarded, and I felt it land in my own chest, which made me angrier because I did not want to feel his pain right now. I did not have room for it. You had a son, Calder said. You were raising our son, and we were building a case, I said. Yeah, that's what I just said. I wanted to find you. His voice cracked on the last word the same way it had on the phone. From the day Rem told me what Declan had done, I wanted to get in the car and drive until I found you. Rem talked me out of it. He said we needed the case first. He said showing up without protection for you was worse than waiting. I looked at Remington. Remington met my eyes and did not look away, and did not offer a defense, and that, somehow, was the most destabilizing thing he could have done. Because Remington defending himself I could have argued with. Remington sitting there absorbing the full weight of it, without flinching, meant he had already decided he deserved it. And it is significantly harder to be furious at someone who agrees with you. Say something, I said. I made the wrong call, he said. I told myself it was strategy. It was also fear. I was afraid that if we came to you broken, with half a case and no solution, you wouldn't come back. And that fear made me wait longer than I should have. I chose the version of this I thought I could control. He paused. I was wrong. I have known I was wrong for 8 months, and I did not know how to reach you in a way that was safe enough for what I needed to say. The table between us felt enormous. You don't get to decide what's safe enough for me, I said. That has never been your call to make. I know. I am not a governance variable. I am not a succession complication. And I am not something you manage the timeline of. I know, he said again, and his voice had dropped to something I had no good word for. Something that lived below the register of authority entirely. I have a son, I said, and my voice finally did the thing I'd been preventing it from doing, frayed at the edge, just slightly, just enough. He has your hands. He has Calder's jaw. He has never once in his 4 years asked me why he doesn't have what Jasper has, because he is 4 and he trusts me, and I have spent every single day trying to make sure he never feels the absence as absence. I stopped, took a breath, and you sat on this for 8 months. Neither of them said anything. The coffee shop moved around us, ordinary and warm and completely indifferent. I stood up, picked up my coffee, put my gloves back on one finger at a time. I need a few days, I said. On do not contact me. Do not contact Marcus. Do not show up at my building. I looked at both of them, one then the other. I will reach out when I'm ready, if I decide I'm ready. Eli, Calder said. I heard everything you said yesterday in the park, I told him, and I meant it. I wanted him to know I meant it. And I believe you. That makes this harder, not easier. Do you understand that? He nodded. Once. The nod of a man who understood and hated that he understood. I walked out of the coffee shop. The Denver morning hit me cold and clean, and I stood on the sidewalk for exactly 3 seconds before I started walking. And I did not cry, not because I wasn't feeling it, but because there was something larger than grief moving through me right now. Something that felt like the ground rearranging itself under 4 years of careful construction. Something that felt terrifyingly like the first day of something I did not yet have a name for. My phone buzzed once. I looked at it. It was not Calder or Remington. It was Noah's school. Hi, Mr. Navarro. Just a note that Noah had a visitor inquiry today. A man came to the front desk asking about enrollment for his son. He asked the receptionist if she knew a child named Noah Navarro. We did not confirm or deny. Wanted you to be aware. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. The cold air suddenly felt different on my skin. Less like weather and more like warning. One Declan Voss was already looking. I stood on that sidewalk for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds of cold air and cardamom smell drifting out from the coffee shop behind me and the mountains doing their usual indifferent supervisory thing at the end of the street. Then I turned around and walked back inside. Calder and Remington were still at the table. Neither had moved. And they had the specific stillness of 2 people who had agreed without speaking to give me whatever I needed, including the option of never coming back through that door. Calder's hands were flat on the table. Remington was looking at his coffee. They both looked up when I came in, and something shifted in both their faces simultaneously, relief and wariness in equal measure, the emotional equivalent of a hell breath deciding whether to release. I put my phone on the table face up with the school's message visible. Calder read it first. I watched the stillness leave his body entirely, replaced by something that moved through him like current through a wire, fast and hot and looking for somewhere to go. His jaw set, his shoulders changed shape. The Alpha King frequency that he usually kept dialed down in civilian spaces came online all at once, and the two people at the nearest table shifted in their seats without knowing why. Then Remington read it second. His response was the opposite. He went more still, colder, the particular stillness of a person reorganizing their entire internal architecture around a new and dangerous fact. He knows about Noah, Remington said, not a question. Apparently, I said. Would you like to revise the timeline on when exactly you were planning to tell me your brother was a threat to my child? The words came out sharper than I intended, not apologizing for them, though. Too sharp was appropriate. Sharp was the correct register for this specific moment. How long has he known? Calder said. His voice had dropped into a register I had only heard twice before, both times in situations that had ended with other alphas physically backing out of rooms. I don't know, I said. That's the problem. I don't know what he knows, how long he's known it, or what he wants with a 4-year-old who has never done anything to anyone. I pulled out the chair I had vacated 3 minutes ago and sat back down because my legs had made a unilateral decision that standing was no longer efficient. I need information. I need it now. And I need you to tell me everything you have on Declan that you've been sitting on for 8 months. Remington and Calder exchanged a look, the kind of look that has an entire conversation inside it. I had forgotten about those looks, the shorthand of two people who had been making decisions together long enough that some of them happened non-verbally. All of it, Remington said to Calder. Calder nodded once. Remington turned to me. Declan has been building a case of his own. After we started investigating him, he pivoted. He stopped trying to block our bond documentation and started looking for leverage instead. Leverage, I said flatly. Well, you have a child with dual Alpha King parentage and no formal pack registration, Remington said, is legally in a gray zone under the Western and Northern Coalition Charter. Declan's argument, if he chooses to make it formally, is that an unregistered heir represents a governance instability. It would give him standing to petition for a formal succession inquiry. I stared at him. He wants to use Noah to destabilize your leadership. He wants to use the existence of Noah, Remington said carefully. Not Noah himself, the legal fact of him. That is the same sentence, I said. You understand that is the exact same sentence. I know. My son is not a legal fact. He is a person. He is 4 years old and he is currently at a Montessori school on Monaco Parkway, drawing mountains, and he has never once in his life been anyone's governance variable, and I will not allow him to become one now. Neither will we, Calder said, low and absolute and leaving no room for alternative interpretation. I looked at him. The anger in my chest did something complicated when it hit the expression on his face, which was the expression of a man who had found the one thing capable of cutting through 4 years of guilt and uncertainty and arrived at something simple and immovable on the other side of it. His child was being circled. Everything else, every complicated layered thing between us, was secondary to that. I need to get Noah, I said. I need to get him from school right now, and I need him somewhere I know is safe while we figure out what Declan's next move is. Our house, Calder said immediately. Absolutely not, I said equally immediately. Eli, Calder, I am not taking my son, who has never met you, to the home of 2 men he doesn't know, on the same day I find out someone is asking about him at his school. That is not how I'm introducing my child to his fathers, and that is not a memory I'm giving any of us. Calder closed his mouth. The muscle in his jaw worked once. Then he nodded, because underneath all of it, he was not actually unreasonable, which had always been one of the more inconvenient things about him. Marcus, I said, he has a place in Capitol Hill, ground floor, Private entrance. Declan has no connection to him. I'll take Noah there. We'll have security on the building within the hour, Remington said. Discreet security, I said. Only nothing that looks like a tactical situation because I am not explaining a tactical situation to a 4-year-old. Discreet, he agreed. I picked up my phone, texted Marcus. Emergency. I need your apartment for tonight, possibly tomorrow. Yes, it's serious. No, I'm not dying. Yes, you need to leave your spare key under the mat. Yes, I'll explain later. Yes, I owe you enormously. Marcus responded in 40 seconds. Key is already there. I'm at work till 6. There's leftover chili in the fridge. Do not touch my vinyl collection. Me. I would never. Marcus. You absolutely would. Don't touch it. Despite everything, something in my face moved. Calder, who was watching me with the focused attention of a man trying to read every available piece of information, caught it. Good friend, he said. The best, I said. He also folds under alpha pheromones like wet paper, so let's not send him into any high-stakes situations. The almost smile crossed Calder's face again, the one that didn't quite commit. I looked away from it because I did not need that particular complication active right now on top of everything else. I stood up again, this time with purpose rather than exit energy. I'm getting Noah, I said. You two are going to send me everything you have on Declan, every document, every communication, every piece of the case you've been building for 8 months. Tonight. Done, Remington said. And then tomorrow morning, I said, and I stopped there for a moment because what I was about to say required me to dismantle something I had been constructing for 4 years, and I wanted to do it consciously, not accidentally. Tomorrow morning, if Noah is okay, and if he is open to it, I want to talk to him about you. Both of you. The table went very quiet. Not a meeting, I said quickly. Not an introduction, just a conversation. I know my son. If I give him information and let him sit with it, he will come to his own conclusions faster than any arranged meeting would produce. He's 4, but he is not a simple 4. He never has been. Calder's throat moved. Okay, he said, and his voice was barely above a whisper. Okay, Remington echoed. I looked at both of them. Really looked, the way I hadn't allowed myself to since the parking lot, taking in the full shape of what 4 years had done and not done. What had changed and what had remained with a stubbornness that I was no longer sure how to feel about. I am still angry, I said clearly, at the situation, at the 8 months, at the unsaid thing that cost us 4 years. I need you to know I'm not standing here because I've processed all of that. I'm standing here because my son's safety is more important than my feelings right now and because... I stopped. Because, Calder said softly, a prompt, patient in a way that cost him something, and I could tell. Because I touched your phone 4 years ago and felt that you had already decided, I said, and I think some part of me has been waiting for the rest of the sentence ever since. Nobody spoke. Outside, Denver went about its morning. Traffic, someone's music. The mountains at the end of every street, steady and permanent and entirely unbothered by human complication. Remington reached across the table, not grabbing, not demanding, just placed his hand palm up between us. An offering, the ask implicit and completely without pressure. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I pulled off my right glove, and I placed my hand in his. It hit me all at once, the way it always did. No buffer, no warning. Not a memory, not a residue. Something present, tense, and immediate. The emotional signature of a man sitting in real time feeling something too large and too long held for any single word to cover. Relief, terror, the specific ache of wanting something back that you weren't sure you deserved to have. And underneath all of it, steady as a bass note, constant as a heartbeat, still, still, still. I pulled my hand back, put my glove on, looked at him. I know, I said quietly. I felt it. Remington's composure, so carefully maintained, so precisely constructed, shifted at the edges. Something came through that he didn't try to stop. Calder put his hand over Remington's on the table and said nothing because he didn't need to. I picked up my bag, picked up my coffee, walked to the door. Tomorrow, I said without turning around. Be patient until tomorrow. I stepped out into the cold morning air and turned toward Monaco Parkway and my son and everything that came next. Behind me, through the glass, I knew they were watching. For once, I did not mind being seen. I picked Noah up 40 minutes early. One, the school didn't ask questions. I was calm at the front desk, which took effort, and I signed the early release form with the steady hand of a man who had decided that fear was useful information, but not a governing authority. Noah came out of his classroom with his backpack and his current mountain drawing, looked at me with those gray-green eyes and said, "It's not 3 o'clock." "Correct," I said. "We're doing something different today." He considered this. "When is it a good different or a confusing different?" "Possibly both." He accepted this with a nod, took my hand, and walked with me to the car with the particular trust of a child who has been given enough consistency to believe that different does not automatically mean bad. That trust lived in my chest like something precious and breakable, and completely worth every single thing I had done to protect it. Marcus's apartment was warm and slightly cluttered, and smelled like coffee and old vinyl records that I was absolutely not going to touch. Noah immediately identified the small bookshelf in the corner and went to investigate it with professional focus. I sat on the couch and sent Remington a message that we were safe and settled. He responded in under a minute with a document link and 2 words, "Sending everything." I spent the next hour reading while Noah organized Marcus's books by color, which Marcus was going to have opinions about, and ate the chili I had heated up and asked me twice whether the mountains could see us from inside buildings. "Probably," I said both times, because, honestly, who was I to say they couldn't? The documents Remington sent were comprehensive in the way that only 8 months of careful, meticulous documentation could be. Declan's communications with the beta advisor. Financial records showing payments made 3 weeks before the council conversation I had felt in Calder's phone. A paper trail of quiet manipulation that stretched back further than I had known, beginning almost from the moment Calder and Remington had first brought me into their shared space, and Declan had apparently done his own threat assessment and decided I was a problem that needed solving. He had done all of this because he was afraid of being passed over. He had dismantled 4 years of my life because of a seat at a table. I closed the documents, sat with the anger for exactly as long as it needed, which was about 90 seconds, and then I set it aside the way I set aside psychometric impressions that were too large to carry around continuously. Filed, accessible, not in my hands right now. Then I looked at Noah, who had finished reorganizing the bookshelf and was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking at a picture book about Colorado wildlife with the focused serenity of a child, fully at home in himself. "Hey, bud," I said. "Can I talk to you about something?" He looked up, closed the book with both hands, careful, the way he handled everything. "Is it important?" "Yes." He moved to the couch, sat beside me with his small, warm presence, and looked at me with those eyes that had never once in 4 years let me get away with anything less than the truth. I told him, not everything, not the Declan part, or the council part, or the 4 years of complicated adult architecture. I told him the part that was his, that he had 2 fathers who were good men, who had not known about him because of a situation that was not anyone's fault in the way that mattered to a 4-year-old. I told him that they were here now in Denver, and they very much wanted to know him if he was open to it, that one of them had a son named Jasper who was almost exactly his age, and who, from what I had seen, was going to be either his best friend or his nemesis, and possibly both. Noah listened to all of this without interrupting, which was unusual for him and meant he was processing at full capacity. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Do they know about my mountains?" he asked. I blinked. Your drawings?" "Yeah." "I told them you were in a mountain era." He nodded slowly. "Do they like mountains?" "They live in Denver," I said. "It would be geographically inconsistent not to." Another pause, then, "Is Jasper nice?" "He seemed very nice. He also got distracted by a fish tank, which I feel like you would appreciate." Noah's mouth did the thing where it tried not to smile and failed completely. I would have looked at the fish too. "I know you would have." He leaned against my arm. "Just slightly, just enough." "Okay," he said simply, "just that." Okay, 4 years of careful preparation for a conversation I had rehearsed 50 different ways, and my son processed it in under 3 minutes and landed on okay with the straightforward grace of a person who had been loved securely enough to believe that new things could also be good things. I put my arm around him and held on for a moment. "That's Dad," he said into my sleeve. "Yeah, you smell like cedar again." "I know. I like it," he said. "It smells like when the heat comes on." We met them at Cheeseman Park the next morning. I had told Calder and Remington to come without Jasper for the first meeting, wanting Noah to have his own space before the variable of an identical stranger was introduced into the equation. They had agreed without argument. They were getting better at agreeing without argument. I noted this. Noah held my hand on the walk from the car. He was wearing his red jacket, slightly too big, because he had seen one he liked at the store last month, and I had bought it one size up so he could grow into it. I noticed it as we walked and felt something move through me that had no name, but that lived in the chest rather than the head. Calder saw us first. He was standing near the same bench where we had sat 2 days ago. And the moment his eyes found Noah, the expression that crossed his face was not something I had words for and would not have shared even if I had. It was private. It was enormous. It was the face of a man seeing something he had not known to grieve the loss of until it was standing 15 feet away in a red jacket. Remington was beside him. He went very still in his particular way, and then his stillness changed quality, became something different from his usual composure. It became the stillness of someone who has stopped controlling their own reaction because the reaction was simply too large for management. Noah looked at them both. Then he looked up at me. "They have my eyes," and he said. "Yeah," I said, "they do." He looked back at them, took a breath with the deep seriousness of a 4-year-old making a considered social decision. Then he let go of my hand and walked toward them across the grass. Calder crouched down when Noah was 3 steps away, bringing himself to eye level with the automatic instinct of someone who understood that you do not loom over children you want to know you. Noah stopped in front of him and studied his face with the focused attention he brought to mountain drawings and star questions. "I'm Noah," he said. "I know," Calder said. His voice came out rough and quiet and completely honest. "I'm Calder." Noah pointed at Remington. "Who's that?" "Remington," Remington said, edged from where he had crouched down beside Calder. "You can call me Rem, if that's easier." Noah tried it out. "Rem." Then to Calder. "Cal?" Calder made a sound that was supposed to be a laugh and came out as something more complicated and nodded. Noah appeared to reach a conclusion. He looked back at me across the grass, checking, the way he always checked, and I nodded once. He turned back to Calder and said with complete 4-year-old directness, "I drew Long's Peak. Hutber, do you want to see it?" Calder said, "More than anything," and meant it in more directions than Noah could currently understand. Noah unzipped his backpack right there on the grass and produced the drawing with both hands. I stood at the edge of the path and watched the 3 of them bent over a piece of paper in the morning light. The mountains at the end of the Denver sky steady and permanent behind them, and felt the specific weight of 4 years setting itself down. Not gone. Not resolved into something neat and painless, but set down, resting on the ground instead of in my chest. Remington looked up from the drawing and across the grass at me. Just for a moment. His eyes did the settling thing, the finding and staying thing, and this time I let it happen without looking away. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I shook my head slightly, because it wasn't that. It wasn't gratitude that had brought us here. It was something older and more stubborn than that, something that had survived 4 years of silence and distance and a deliberately constructed wall and had still been present, tense and immediate when I touched his hand in a coffee shop. Still, still, still. I walked across the grass toward them. Noah looked up when my shadow fell across the drawing and patted the ground beside him with the authority of a child arranging his world. "Sit down, Dad," he said. "I'm explaining the mountain." Calder caught my eye over Noah's head, where the almost smile finally committed, fully, completely. The real version, the one I remembered, the one that had always done something inconvenient to my equilibrium. I sat down on the cold Denver grass between my son and his father's, and Declan Voss, with his governance arguments and his succession fears and his 8 months of careful maneuvering, was going to find out very soon that the thing he had tried to prevent had happened anyway. Not because of pack law or coalition charter or any formal documentation, but because a 4-year-old had walked across a park with a mountain drawing and said hello. And because some bonds, it turned out, do not require permission. They just require the courage to finally stop running from them. Noah's voice filled the cold morning air, serious and bright and completely at home in itself. "This part is the summit," he said. "That's where the snow lives." The mountain stood at the end of the sky and did not argue. Neither did I. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even crazier and more intriguing than you can imagine. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. The next story drops soon.